So today we're going to go with You Are the Light of the World. That's what I named it, which is probably not, it's pretty common. But where I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 5, 14 through 16. Matthew chapter 5, 14 through 16. So it says, Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot hide, cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So, as I was looking at this on here today, we're sitting here talking about the light of the world. And so I was studying, I was looking, one of the things I found was a light is meant to shine and give directions, right? The individuals Jesus described in verses 3 through 10, and I'm fixing to go through them, that was earlier in the verse that we just went through the whole Beatitudes, obviously radiate to a point that point others to a path, and their influence would be evident as a city set on a hill. So when we look at a person that, say, is blessed or poor in spirit, blessed are those that mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed the which do thirst and hunger, blessed that are merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, and blessed are the peacemakers, right? And then that ultimately, that brings persecution. So those are people, when Jesus was writing that, he was talking about salt and light. When he was saying this, not writing it, saying it, he was preaching, he says they were salt and light. And he gave us that example to begin with of how to be that light, So let's look at Christ, though, is the source of our light. He is the true light that enlightens every man, as in John 1:9, it says, that is the true light, which enlightens every man that cometh into the world. And so Jesus also said in John 9:5, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Now that he has left the world, light comes through those who he has enlightened. Paul tells us in Ephesians 5:8, for ye were sometimes darkness, but now ye are the light of the Lord, light in the Lord. Now ye light, for ye were sometimes darkness, but now are ye light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. So Jesus said, you are the light of the world. He said he was the light that lighted the world. So that's one of the things he said, not only that you were the light, but that he was also the light. So light is obvious. Everyone around you should see the light that you are. Light works openly. Whereas salt works through how we live, light works more directly in how we communicate and teach and preach. So light helps produce what is righteous and true and reveals what is wrong and false. So in the book of Luke in his first book in Acts, but if you look and read in Acts, the book of Luke, he refers in Acts his first account or first book. And in Acts 1:1, when you read it, it says, the former thesis I have made, O Theophilus. So he's talking to Theophilus, and he says the former thesis, which is the book of Luke, right? And he says, of all things he wrote, of all things began to both do and to teach. All things that Jesus began to do and teach. So he's showing us right there that salt and light, he was to do it and he was to teach it, right? So he wrote on there. So the point is that salt is we are salt, we are to live and do. As light, we are to teach and preach and how we speak to others. So it's to shine light. Luke said in his first book that he wrote that all that Jesus began both to do and teach, the book of Luke. Jesus' work was always to do and speak, and to live and teach, and to set us as an example. Now, as for light, King David also saw God as light. In Psalms 36:9, he says, "For the tree is the fountain of life. In thy light shall we see light." John also tells us that God is light. He says in 1 John 1:5-7, "This is the message which we have heard of him and declare unto you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his Son, cleanses us from all sins." It guides us in the steps we take, and which way we should go. God's light is to walk by and to live by. And I was reading in Psalms 119, 105, it says, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." So y'all see the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking for light, and I looked for all the verses and stuff that had to do with light as I was reading. So I wanted to give you everything I could give you and put it as a story. So right here it says God's light is his word. Because start with, it was God, it was light, Jesus was light, he's giving it to us, and also to show you where he is. God's light is his word. The written word, his complete revelation, his word, the word of Scripture. John 1:1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." In John 1:1 it also says, "That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, and which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled of the word of life." That was 1 John 1:1. So John 1:1 was the first one, then 1 John 1:1 was the second one. In Revelations, John also said, Revelations 19:13, "And he was clothed with the vesture dripped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God." In Hebrews 4:12, "For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of the soul and spirit, and of the joints and marrows, and discerning of the thoughts of the internal of the hearts." As we as God's people are to proclaim God's light, just as Jesus gave light, we too are to follow him. 1 Peter 2:21, "For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow in his steps." Jesus came to give light to them, and then this is Luke 1:17. "He came to give light to them that sit in darkness, and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace." So one of the things that I was thinking, and I had some, by looking at different people, I think it was John MacArthur on that, he said one thing, but then I actually had this in my mind. It says, "Just like the sun shines and the moon reflects its light, Jesus shines on us, and we are a reflection to shine on the world that is in darkness. So Paul said to the church in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians 2, 4 through 6, for God who commanded the light to shine out of the darkness, he has shined in our hearts to give light of knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So Paul also said to the Philippians, says that ye may be blameless and harmless, the Son of God, without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as the light of the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither have I labored in vain. So Paul was saying all of this stuff so that we would shine in the light of Jesus. All that word, he went through and preached the gospel to all those people, to all the worlds, to all the Philippians, to the Corinthians. But he wanted to do it so it wouldn't. That's the only way, is through Christ. Any other way would be in vain. So then I got where it says, a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid, right? Out of those verses that we saw. So I'm looking at a picture of a city that's on a hill. It's actually in Italy. And the province is called the province of Viterbo, the city of Boggiano or something like that. So anyways, it's in Italy. And it's one of the things when it says a city that is set on a hill, you got to be in the public as a Christian. We can't hide, right? It says it cannot be hid. So we have to be in public. It says day or night, a city on a hill can be seen. In the day, its buildings and houses stand out, and at night, its light shines from the windows, right? The gospel was not given to be secret hidden treasure, but it was given to enlighten everybody. In 1 John 1:9, it says that the true light which lighteth every man that cometh into the world, which was Jesus, was the true light. In Matthew 5:15, it says, neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. So when I was reading Dwight Pentecost, one of the things he said when he was a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary, he says, one semester we admitted a blind student to the semester. I noticed that he went from class to class and dorm room to dining room. Someone held his arm and guided him to his destination. The one who took his arm was his light, and he walked in the light of another. The world in which we live is blind. If all men were blind, the blind would have no desire for anything other than their blindness. But because you see, you create a desire in a blind man for that which he does not have, but which you have. Then you become light to get to the one who is blind, to lead him to the one who is the light of the world. So when I was reading that, I was thinking about, and I'm sure each and every person probably can think of that in their own selves. I know when I was younger and I was around in my 20s and I got saved, I was over in Mississippi, and there was a guy, and everything he did about him was about God. Where he'd smash his finger instead of like I worked around construction guys, and he'd smash his finger, and instead of cursing, he would say, thank God it's not gone. It just, the way he presented himself made a big impact in my life. And I wanted to be like him. I wanted to have that same kind of impact that he had on me just by working around him. And so I'll never forget that. That was God put him in my life. And the light he shone, is what turned around and helped me become who I am. And so everybody might have a story like that. Maybe everybody don't, but we're to give our life and present our life as a light to shine to every man. It says, you are the light to bring a man to Christ. It's in Matthew 10:27. What I tell you in the darkness, that ye speak in light. What ye hear in the ear, preach upon the housetops. Jesus said that. Those whom Jesus had called to pray for workers, he then called to become workers. As they begin to see the world as he sees it, look out on a lost humanity through their Lord's eyes, and with his heart of compassion, they also began to see that they themselves were called to go out and to warn that lost world of the coming harvest of judgment, and to invite them into the Lord's kingdom. So we're to do that, to be that light. We're to stand there and to give the gospel. And as I was reading along, it says, and vital as it is, prayer is not all that is required. A believer who prays for God to send workers, but is unwilling to go himself, prays insincerely and hypocritically. The Christian who genuinely prays for God to send witnesses is also willing to be a witness. So, Matthew chapter 5:16, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And also in John 8:12, then spake Jesus unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have light of life. So that was a good thing right here that I had read, and I got this actually from listening to some other guys, and that brings on the point. A lot of people kind of dismiss this, but this has to do with the Pharisees when they brought the woman that had the adultery and they cast her before Jesus. See, they were trying to trick Jesus into doing something. And let me read what it says. If you look in John 8:1-12, John 8:1-12, it says, Jesus went on to the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again unto the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken into adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commands us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This is that they said, tempting him, that they might accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground, as though he had heard them not. So when they continued asking, he lifted himself up and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted in their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the eldest unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. And when Jesus had lifted himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? And she said, No man, Lord. And Jesus spoke unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Then Jesus spake unto them, saying, I am the light of the world, and he that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. So, when we were looking at the scribes and the Pharisees and what they had done here, they were trying to trap him. See, if he would have said stone her, he would have went against the Roman law at the time, which said that the Jewish people couldn't stone. So he would have broke the Roman law. If he would have said not to stone her, or something, then he would have went against the law of Moses. So they thought they had him trapped right there. But here's what Jesus did. And one of the things, it says, but Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground. Now I heard in some of the sermons and some of the things that has to do with that the Jewish people, when you have somebody sit down and stoop and write on the ground like he did that. You notice he used his finger, and it doesn't tell us what he said. Jewish people take that writing on the ground as the claim that he was God. The same God that sit there, and which we know he is God, but the same God that sit there and wrote on the ground in the dirt was the same God that in Exodus wrote on the tablets with his finger. On the tablets. So, like I wrote down, he says, do you understand? That as he was writing on the ground with his finger, I believed he was claiming to be God. And that's not anything abnormal for Jesus to do. He claimed several times. And I'm going to show. He was claiming that he was the one that wrote that law that they were trying to accuse him of. But I say unto you, and this is some of the things what he says, but I say unto you, this is what I meant, or my intentions was when I wrote. In the whole Sermon on the Mount, Jesus sits there and he says, you've heard not to commit adultery, right? But I say unto you, he who looks unto a woman and commits adultery in his heart already, right? So that's one of the things. It's not. In Exodus 31:18, and it says, and he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communion with him upon the Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimonies, tables of stones, written with the finger of God. So when I look at this verse, and I see it's talking about his finger, not what he wrote, but his finger. And not only that, when you look at another thing that he was claiming, he claimed to be God. But when you look at another thing that he did, how come he did it? He said first, and he stooped down and he wrote with his finger. Then he gets up and he asks, he tells part of the law, he who is without, which is another part of the law that a lot of people don't realize. It says that no man can accuse a person of this crime if they're guilty of it. So, first, let me read what I said. First, Jesus claimed to be a unique Son of God, and I was telling you that I would show you some places where he did. First, Jesus claimed to be the unique Son of God. As a result, the Jewish leaders tried to kill him, calling God his own Father, making himself to be equal with God. That was in John 5:18. And furthermore, Jesus made an unmistakable claim to deity to the chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin, to Caiaphas the high priest. He says, if you are Christ, the Son of the Blessed One, I am, said Jesus, and you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the Mighty One and coming in the clouds of heaven. And that's in Mark 14:61 and 62. And as I was reading, trying to explain this, what I'm trying to say, I find in people, one of the things that a lot of preachers want to sit there and worry about what was he writing, right? What did he write? That's not the point of what he wrote. The point, he was making a picture of what it was. It was a vivid picture to the people. It says, though the author gives no explicit information on what Jesus wrote, there was a reason to think that Jesus bends down to write as a claim that he was God. Two clues point to this direction. First, there is a detail that Jesus writes with his finger. This is likely an allusion to God when he wrote the 2 stone tablets containing the Ten Commandments, and God delivered them to Mount Sinai. The tablets written by the finger of God. But another hint is that it was 2 stone tablets that were given. Moses, not once but twice. So there's 2 tablets, and he bent down twice to write back in the ground after he went down. So the first time, and that not only that, there was also 2 times that he had to give the commandments to Moses, because you remember he broke the first one. When he broke the first one, the rock, what happens to rock when you break something? It turns to dust, it turns to dirt, right? You just crumble it up, it becomes like dirt. So there's not really a sense in trying to figure out what he said in his finger, but what he was showing to do. So the scribes and Pharisees thought they had trapped him. If he let her go, he would be breaking the Mosaic law. If he said stone her, he would go against the Roman law. And that was in Deuteronomy 22:22. If a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then they shall both of them die, and both of the men and the women, and both the man and that lay with the woman and the woman, thou shalt put away the evil from Israel. So when they continued to ask him, he lifted up and said to them, he that is without sin cast the first stone. Let him first cast a stone at her. So when we was talking about also one of the things that Jesus was doing in that point, he told her, he says, the one witness shall not rise. In the Deuteronomy, if you look in Deuteronomy 19:15, it says, one witness shall not rise up against a man for iniquity or for any sin that he sinneth, right? And it says, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, 2 witnesses, or the mouth of 3 witnesses shall a matter be established. Now, a lot of people take that one part to say that you can't judge nobody because you've sinned. That's not what that's saying. If that was the case, no, you as a it's not meant to be a 100% moral perfect. Because if you tried to be 100% moral perfect, then you couldn't even tell your child what to do. You couldn't punish your child. A policeman couldn't. A judge couldn't punish. Nothing like that could ever happen. So it's not trying to tell people that you can't tell me what to do because of that. That's not what God's intention was. God's intention was that he was to let them know that he, as bending down, he knew the law, right? And not only that he knew the law, that he knew the law better than they did. So it says, and they began to go away one by one, because they knew that they were all guilty of the same law. The witness that were dismissed based on the basis of the law. See, he used that same law, the same law of Moses, against that to prove his point. When he told them to start with, he sit there and he says, where are your accusers? See, they couldn't actually accuse because they were all guilty of it. Because he had done showed where, if you look at a woman you've lusted after, you're already guilty. Plus, they didn't bring the man there. That's another thing that's ought to be there. And if you found them in the act, so they would have had to have him, and they didn't. They hid him. So, and another thing, it says, at the mouth of two witnesses, or out of the mouth of three shall a matter be established. They didn't have that there. So, it says in John 8:10, it says, when Jesus had lifted him up, he saw none but the woman. And he said, where are thine accusers? Hath no man accused thee? So he didn't have those three. In John 8:11, and she said, no man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. So, as I was studying and stuff, one of the guys said, you need to find Jesus as your lawyer. He dismissed that case right there. Now, he didn't sit there and tell her everything was okay. He told her to go and sin no more. So it doesn't mean that you get grace to go out and sin all you want. It just means that he might not be there next time to protect her. So we don't need to do that either. So he said he was showing that he knew the law better than they did. Then he said, then this is where the light comes in. He said that to the crowd that was gathered around, and this was the whole point of the whole story. He said, I am the light of the world, and he that followeth me shall not walk. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. What he was saying right there was that if that woman would have been following him, she would have never been in that situation to start with. And two, the men that accused her, they would have never. See, because that situation is moral darkness. And the men that were with her, and all of them were accused her, were all living in darkness. Right? So if she would have been, if they would all been following him, they would have never been in that situation. Matthew 5:16 says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Christians are to be seen as having a higher standard of living, but not in a material way, but in a higher moral standard of living. That they may see, here's what he says, that they may see your good work, or that they may see your good actions. Works, actions, same word. That he didn't mean doing good, but he meant being good. See, he raised the standards higher than anybody ever has raised them. And let me give you one of the things we're going to look through these standards that he raised. So, murder begins in the heart. Adultery begins in the heart. Marriage is sacred and binding. Love your enemies. It says, lay up your treasures in heaven. Fasting is to be seen only by God. You can't not serve God and riches. He said, do not worry. He said, keep asking, seeking, and knocking. He says, the narrow way. He says, you'll know them by their fruits. And build on a rock, not on sand. Those are some of the things throughout the whole Sermon on the Mount. He lifted the standards higher than they were ever lifted before. That's why, as I've been studying, a lot of people leave the Sermon on the Mount out or say it's for the millennial, because it's impractical or impossible to live that way. And it is. It's not a natural thing to live that way. It's supernatural. And that's why Jesus said, let them see how you live so that you'll glorify your Father in heaven. Each and every one of us that are Christians, God grants us to do things that aren't really right. How many times would a natural man not forgive somebody that they don't feel like deserves forgiveness? But God told you to forgive, love your enemies, forgive them that do evil to you. How many times have we done those things? And we're supposed to allow that to be seen in our lives, that we're supposed to every man, so that the God can get glorified for that. I mean, there's so many things that we do in this world. So what Jesus did was lift people up to meet that standard. Many people in today's church and to society, they are trying to lower the standard of God to meet the people. We're not to lower our standards to meet people around, but we're to lift the standard. Jesus lifted us to that standard, right? He's the one that supernaturally changes us. And just like I was sharing with you about that man in Mississippi, he invited me into his home. He took his daughter out of her bed and housed me. And he didn't know me no more than a couple months. I don't know many people that would do that. And wanted me to stay there, wanted me to stay working there. That's just things that I've gone through, that I've seen in my life. That's not natural. And God tells us to share, to be a light to the world. So I was looking at some of the things right after he comes off the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 8:2-3. He said, and behold, there came a leper worshiping him, saying, Lord, if thou wilt, canst thou make me clean? And Jesus put forth his hand and touched him and says, I will, be thou clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. So the reason why I put that there, as I said, Jesus lifts us up to be that light. We're the leper. We're the one that had to come to him, as I was talking about poor in spirit as we come through. We're the ones that had to come to him. He lifts us up and supernaturally changes us in our lives. I tell people at times when they say, how can you prove that God exists? How can you prove? I said, my life is proof. There ain't nothing that somebody can say to me to change my belief. Nothing could happen in this world that would change my belief, because God has supernaturally changed who I am. And I'm sure each and every one of you has changed in your heart. Cleansed us. John 14:6 says, Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father but by me. Mark chapter 10:25-27, it says, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. It says, they were astonished out of the measure, saying amongst them, who can be saved? When we look at that we're talking about what we've looked at. Who could be saved? And Jesus said unto them, with men it is impossible, but not with God. With God all things are possible. So, we're to be the light of men. We're to be, the light of God. We're to shine our light to all men. So,